Oh, there's something in my chest that I can't hide. When feelings get involved, I'm terrified. 'Cause I've been here before and said goodbye. Oh, are you the one when I try look I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? But you would give it one more chance. Turn away and wrestle with my doubts. Oh, I leave them all behind, but don't know how. Bury my head deep within the crowd, but I'm reaching for your hand to pull me out. Oh, are you the one when I try look I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? You can see straight through my life. Oh, there's something in my chest.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Where the heck are my captions? Not here. Why? Because they ran out again. Why? Because I'm running late. Why? Because life. Okay, that should do it. If I remember to start them. There we go. Okay. And might as well fix the other screen while I'm at it. Don't know if I'll game tonight, but I'll be needing it anyway, so there we go. All right, time to get started on Chapter 6. This also happens to be Occult Reading Stream 100. And what did I decide to do that was special for the 100th stream for this particular series? Read another chapter. That's as special as it gets around here. All right, so the very first thing, I skipped this picture last time because it had to do specifically with this this next chapter. So this is Robert Butts stands next to a portrait of Seth. And we'll get to Seth in a minute. If you're not familiar, I'm not terribly familiar, but I am familiar enough to kind of know the basic idea of who Seth is. Okay. All right. All right, so here we go. Chapter 6, Time, Space, Travel, according to Seth/Jane Roberts, by Madeline Rose Logue. Oh, is this? I did not realize this was like a. Have I not been paying attention? Have these been all by different? No, this is the only chapter so far that has mentioned an author. The rest have all just been chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. This one is chapter 6, and it's by Madeline Rose Logue. Okay, here we go. It looks like two different short quotes, both by Seth via Jane Roberts. There are journeys of consciousness that no one can take but you. And then the other one is Space and Time Are Intertwined. Seth via Jane Roberts, 1977. When I first read David Hatcher Childress's Anti-Gravity in the World Grid, I was so excited I let out a loud wow. The world grid maps included in the book show the location of the coordination points that Seth talked about in his book by Jane Roberts, Seth Speaks. He had written that the coordination points could be located mathematically, and here they were. Then in 1989, I met David when I joined one of his Adventures Unlimited expeditions to look for a legendary lost city in the jungles of Peru. The brochure he sent me stated that each member of the expedition would create his own adventure. That sounded too Sethian to me, or so Sethian to me, that I couldn't resist. When we didn't find the lost city, I announced that it just hadn't yet been placed in our past from our future for us to find in the present. I said other stuff too, like our space scientists will sure be surprised when they find pyramids on the moon and Mars and discover that they are our own. I'd read about that in the Seth books by Jane Roberts way back in the early 70s. It was something I couldn't forget. I was so fascinated by the idea. Excuse me, sip. Jane Roberts started out writing poetry and science fiction. When she decided to write a book about ESP, she and her husband, Robert Butts, borrowed a Ouija board from their landlord, and to their surprise, it worked. It wasn't long before Jane was in a trance state and channeling Seth, while her husband, Rob, patiently sat and took down dictation. Seth has described himself as an energy personality essence, no longer focused in physical form. He is also, and this one is my favorite because it gives me a good chuckle. Wait for it. Describes himself as a bloodless old spook. Together they wrote over 20 books, including Jane's own 2 books of poetry, 1 children's book, and 3 science fiction novels. One based not only on the Seth philosophy, but simultaneous time and something about ruins being placed in the past from the future to be found in the present. Jane Roberts became known worldwide as a modern-day pioneer in the field of metaphysics and philosophy. Among the other subjects covered in her books are UFOs, ancient civilizations, and time-space travel. I'll have to see if I have any of her books or Seth's books or whoever it was. When I received a letter from David telling me he was writing a new book about time travel and asking me if I would help him locate specific references in the Seth books, I thought, sure, no problem. Wow, was I wrong. I spent 2 weeks searching. The early hardcover Seth books published by Prentice Hall that I have are not indexed, although the newer editions published by Amber Allen in the San Rafael, California are. so I had only my own margin notes to go by. I asked fellow Seth readers if they recalled which book certain references were in. I went through my copy of a Seth, Jane Roberts, and Robert Butt's combined index, compiled by Bob Proctor. I found a lot of references in time, space, and space travel, UFOs, out-of-body travel, Atlantis, early civilizations, and probabilities, but not that one elusive sentence that stated that the pyramids on Mars and the moon were our own. However, I did locate the statement referring to the placement of things from the future into the past. It is in Volume 2 of The Unknown Reality by Jane Roberts. In Note 11 for Session 242, Seth says, quote, Rupert, Seth called Jane Rupert, because he said it was her entity name, has implied in his novel, The Education of Oversoul 7, that some archaeological discoveries about the past are not discovered in our present because they do not exist yet. Now such concepts are difficult to explain in my kind of prose and in your language, but in certain terms, the ruins of Atlantis have not been found because they have not been placed in your present yet, in your past yet from the future. I think that's the end of the quote, or, well, maybe not. Now the future is probable. However, in your terms, there are ruins of the civilization that served as the concrete basis for the one Atlantean legend. Those civilizations were scattered. The so-called ruins would not be found in any one place as expected, therefore. There are some beneath the Aegean Sea, and some beneath an offshoot of the Atlantic, and some beneath the Arctic, for the world had a different shape. Time is simultaneous, so those civilizations exist along with your own. Your methods of dating the age of the Earth are very misleading. In our terms, from your present, you plant images, tales, legends, at any given time that seem to come from the past, but are actually like ghost images from the future, for you to follow or disregard as you choose. I think that's the end of the quote. It's hard to tell in the way the punctuation is in this book. I began wondering about myself. Had I only thought I'd read that bit about the pyramids on Mars being ours, or had I intuitively felt that that would be the case someday? Or had I actually read the passage in a probable Seth book? That's not uncommon. Just about everyone I know who reads Seth books bumps into this one. Whenever we reread any of the books, it's like reading a brand new one because there's always something that wasn't noticed before, and so it seems to be new material. We laugh about this all the time and tease each other with, quote, oh, you must have read that in a probable book. I don't have that in mine, end quote. Here's an example. I'm sure I read just recently where Seth says that when we pick up a book to read, we create the words on the page as we go along. That's not an exact quote, and it's short and elusive, and probably not indexed, except perhaps in someone's own margin notes. It's the sort of statement that can stick in a person's mind like glue. I have a book like that. Every time I reread it, it is like a whole different book. Not a Seth book. I have never read any of the Seth books. I'm going to look and see if I have them, though. I could have simply assumed we'd find our own ruins on Mars after reading what Seth had to say about space travelers in Chapter 15 of Seth Speaks. Quote, there have been other great scientific civilizations, some spoken of in legend, some completely unknown, all in your terms now vanished. Groups of people in various cycles of reincarnational activity have met crisis after crisis, have come to your point of physical development and either gone beyond it or destroyed their particular civilization. They are given another chance. They began with a psychological head start as they formed new primitive groupings. Others, solving the problems, left your physical planet for other point in the physical universe. When they reached that level of development, however, they were spiritually and psychically mature and were able to utilize energies of which you have no practical knowledge. I guess maybe each of these things is a different quote, all from Seth from that book. I'm guessing because each passage starts with a new quote but doesn't end with one. Earth to them now is the legendary home. They formed new races and species that could no longer physically accommodate themselves to your atmospheric conditions. They have discarded material form. This group of entities still takes an interest, a great interest in Earth. They lend it support and energy in a way they could be thought of now as Earth gods. On your planet, they were involved in 3 particular civilizations long before the time of Atlantis, when in fact your planet itself was in a somewhat different position. The poles were reversed as they were for 3 long periods of your planet's history. These civilizations were highly technological. And then that finally has an end quote. Then it goes on. Seth carries this further along in Volume 1 of The Unknown Reality when discussing probable technologies in Session 702. And here we go back into probably a series of quotes. There have indeed been civilizations upon your planet that understood as well as you, and without any kind of technology, the workings of the planets, the position of the stars, people who even foresaw later global changes. They used a mental physics. There were men before you who journeyed to the moon and who brought back data quite as scientific and pertinent. There were those who understood the origin of your solar system far better than you. Some of these civilizations did not need spaceships. Instead, highly trained men combined the abilities of dream art scientists and mental physicists, cooperated in journeys not only through time but through space. There are ancient maps drawn from a 200-mile or more vantage point, these meticulously completed on return from such journeys. So, quote, so each one, like I said, starts with a quote. There were sketches of atoms and molecules also drawn after trained men and women learned the art of identifying with such phenomena. There are significances hidden in the archives of many archaeological stores that are not recognized by you because you have not made the proper connections, and in some cases you have not advanced sufficiently to understand the information. End quote. In the 40th session, 1043 April 1st, 1964 of the early sessions, Seth said of space travel, quote, in your terms, it will take you too long to get where you want to go. Quote, so that was quote, scientists will begin to look for easier methods. The first really important discovery will be made by an orthodox scientist out of pure desperation. The scientific communities are even now being forced to consider the possibilities of telepathy as a means of communication. Quote, it is very possible that you might end up in what you intend as a space venture, only to discover that you have traveled to another plane, but at first you will not know the difference. End quote. Then in the 45th session, 935, I assume these are time, they look like times. Seth continued, quote, hypnotism will become more and more of a tool of scientific investigation. Telepathy will be proven without a doubt and utilized, sadly enough, in the beginning for purposes of war and intrigue. Nevertheless, telepathy will enable your race to make its first contact with alien intelligence. It will not at first be recognized as such. Quote, here Jane laughed as she paced back and forth in trance. Quote, there is nothing more strange in such contact than there is in my contact with you, but because you are so involved with camouflage camouflage apparent reality, contact with such intelligence will be a startling discovery. The contact made will be from one male to another, although the alien male from another camouflage galaxy will be more involved than you consider possible. Quote, the actual telepathy contact with this alien intelligence will occur perhaps by the year 2001. However, for reasons that I will not go into, a hitch will develop of which your scientist will not be aware, at least in your terms. The intelligence that you contact will no longer inhabit that same universe by the time that the contact is made. Okay? Quote, by then you will have discovered that your present theory of the expanding universe is in error, and this error will affect your calculations as to the exact location in your space of the intelligence contacted. The contact will be made, I believe, in Australia. End quote. In 1997, a film, Contact, was made, set in Australia. The movie... Set in Australia? The movie is about a woman who makes contact with an alien. Contact took place kind of all over the globe, but okay, let's continue on. Quote, space travel will be dumped when your scientists discover that space as you know it is a distortion, and that journeying from one so-called galaxy to another is done through divesting the physical body of camouflage, parentheses matter. The vehicle of so-called space travel is mental and psychic mobility, in terms of psychic transformation of energy, enabling spontaneous and instantaneous mobility through the spacious present. End quote. And then I came to the biggest mind blower yet, and it's not in the latter Seth books. Seth didn't like to make predictions because, as he often explains in his books, there really is no future, nor past, nor present, but simultaneous time, with everything happening all at once, and also we do have free will. We create our own reality, a phrase originated with Seth and now in common usage. By using our inner senses, such as dreams, we have the ability to make changes and to accept or reject any given predictions. This is why many psychic readings are wrong. The individual who receives the reading changes the predicted outcome. That could be, or it could be that the psychic really isn't a psychic. The early sessions is a set of 6 to 10 books of dictation given by Seth prior to the first of the actual Seth books. As of this date, April 1999, 4 of these books are available from New Awareness Network Incorporated, as it was Jane Roberts' last wish that all the work be published. 6 to 10? So they don't know. Maybe in 1999 they didn't know if there would be how many there would be. I don't know. Beginning in November 1963, Seth was training Jane in the art of channeling and was giving all the background material for the series of books. He would later dictate with the intention of reminding the human race of what it had forgotten, as he put it. He drew on all the previous work done by the great philosophers and metaphysicians, and then pushed it all forward in an easy-to-understand language that would appeal to the more scientific Western mind. He knew the world was ready. However, he kept Jane and Rob in the dark for quite a while as he led them, quote-unquote, along the garden path, as Jane later noted. All of this was very difficult for her, and in reading the early sessions books, I've noticed how she rebelled. After all, she had wanted to become a good mainstream writer of poetry and science fiction and not be involved in what she considered, quote-unquote, New Age crap. Reading the books is fun, informative, and mind-blowing. Try this one from session 55. Quote, Space travel, when it occurs, will utilize expansion of self. Your idea of death is based upon your dependence upon the outer senses. You will learn that it is possible through no physical act to relinquish the physical body, expand the self, using atoms and molecules as stepping stones to a given destination, and reforming the physical body at the other end. End quote. Doesn't that sound a lot like Beam Me Up, Scotty, from the old Star Trek TV series? Here's another little goodie. Quote, any point in space is also a point in what you think of as time, a doorway that you have not learned to open, end quote. Another quote, true space travel would of course be time-space travel, in which you learned to use points in your own universe as dimensional clues that would serve as entry points into other worlds. Quote, there are space-time coordinates that operate from your viewpoint and space travel from the standpoint of your time, made along the axis of your space, will be a relatively sterile procedure. Some reported instances of UFOs happened in the past as far as the visitors were concerned, but appeared as images or realities in your present. This involves craft sightings only, end quote. Seth stated in session 713 for October 21st, 1974. In the previous session, 712, for October 16th, 1974, Seth said, quote, your own coordinates close you off from recognizing that there are other intelligences alive even within your own solar system. You will never meet them in your exterior reality, for you are not focused in the time period of their existence. You may physically visit the very same planet on which they reside, but to you the planet will appear barren or not to support life. In the same way, others can visit your planet with the same results. End quote. So it seems the best way to travel and to meet others is to change your own focus to match each other's time periods. To do this, we have to learn how to use our inner senses without fear and with as little distortion as possible. As Seth continues in the 712th session, quote, there are inner coordinates having to do with the inner behavior of electrons. If you understood these, then such travel could be relatively instantaneous. The coordinates that link you with others who are more or less of your kind have to do with psychic and psychological intersections that result in a like space-time framework, end quote. In January of 1964, in Session 16, Seth expressed his surprise that we were able to see flying saucers at all and went on to explain something about their origins, although he was not familiar with them in any depth. Quote, beings from other planes have appeared among you sometimes on purpose and sometimes by accident, as in some cases humans have quite accidentally blundered through the apparent curtain between your present and your past. So have beings blundered into the apparent division between one plane and another. Usually, when they have done so, they were invisible on your plane, as the few of you who fell into the past, or the apparent past, were invisible to the people of the past. Quote, the flying saucer appearances came from a plane more advanced in technological sciences than Earth at this time. The camouflage paraphernalia appears more or less visible. The atoms and molecules that structurally compose the UFO, and which are themselves formed by vitality, are more or less aligned according to the pattern of its own territory. Now, as the craft enters your plane, a distortion occurs. Its actual structure is caught in a dilemma of form between transforming itself completely into Earth's particular camouflage pattern and retaining its original pattern. The earthly viewer attempts to correlate what he sees with what he supposedly knows or imagines possible in the universe. Quote, what he sees is something between a horse and a dog that resembles neither. The flying saucer retains what it can of its original structure and changes what it must. This accounts for many of the conflicting reports as to shape, size, and color. The few times the craft shoots off at right angles, it has managed to retain functions ordinary to it in its particular habitat. Quote, These vehicles cannot stay on your plane for any length of time at all. The pressures that push against the saucer itself are tremendous. The struggle to be one thing or another is very great on any plane. To conform to the laws of a particular plane is a practical necessity, and at this time the flying saucer craft cannot afford to stay betwixt and between for any indefinite period. What they do is take quick glimpses of your plane. It is interesting to note that Seth was discussing UFOs in the 1960s and 70s, and although he said beings from other planes and other planets had visited here, he did not say anything about actual physical contact taking place, nor did he ever mention abduction as an actual physical experience. He always emphasized, in fact, he repeated over and over again in every one of his books written through Jane Roberts, that we write our own reality and we get whatever we focus upon. A friend of mine who knew his metaphysics and understood the Seth material once told me of a very vivid dream he'd had one night. In the dream, he became aware of some aliens coming for him, and he knew they planned to abduct him and perform some sort of vile experiments on his person. They came so close he could feel them taking hold of him. Oh, he was scared. Then he remembered that he was dreaming, and he remembered that he created his own reality, and that he created his own dreams. At that point in the dream, he declared his belief in his own power and willfully changed the reality of the dream event and then woke up. Sounds similar to lucid dreaming. Okay. This, of course, led to a long discussion from space-time travel into dreams as vehicles of travel and out-of-body experiences to reincarnation and simultaneous time. Jane Roberts died in 1984, and though there are other people channeling Seth, they are channeling their own Seth, not Jane's Seth. There is a big difference. Now we are into 1999, and much of what Seth told us about is coming to pass, or at least is getting closer. Last year, at a gathering of Jane Roberts/Seth fans, Mill, who speaks through Harry Johnson in London, England, said, quote, "You will find within 50 or 100 years at most, but more likely 50, that vehicular transport will become no longer necessary as you use your own ability to dissolve the pattern of your body and recreate it at a distance. Now that appears ridiculous, something seen on television films at the moment. But this is a possibility, a probability. It will be a reality 70 years or so from now, in my estimation of probabilities. I am convinced that the most likely result of the passage of time will bring about the quality of mind which enables teleportation of the individual to occur. It is the only way by which other planets will be inhabited and other galaxies discovered and contacted. Quote, "This is the future I shall project into. It is a future where people have time to cultivate their inner self as well as their outer self. It is a time of huge mental development, so that the children, and particularly the grandchildren of people alive 20, 30 years from now, will expect to be able to teleport themselves around the earth, to mentally communicate with each other." Quote, "You do so at the moment. The inner self is very much involved in that sort of thing, and as the inner self and the outer self merge, so a new quality of humanity will arise in bodies which are not separated into egocentric, selfish beings pretending to be divorced from the balances of their totality, but a race of whole people will be originated and will continue to spread and populate the earth. This is the kind of future to which I have committed myself, and to which I sincerely hope you too will commit yourselves." End quote. Mill, like Seth, is an, quote, "energy personality essence," end quote. However, Mill has never had an incarnation on Earth. He has been studying people through Harry Johnson and plans to incarnate sometime in the next 25 to 30 years, which means that will still be here and our Earth will still be intact, no matter what the doomsday sayers tell us. I think we are our own salvation, those of us who wish to be. And won't it be fun when we really can match our sense of time to that of another and go walk, not in the ruins of a legendary lost city in a jungle, but in a city still alive and not yet ruined and buried in the jungle? Okay, and then there's a bibliography at the end of that one, um, and no pictures, but it's an interesting list of books. The Education of Oversoul 7, 1973. The Further Education of Oversoul 7, 1979. The Oversoul 7 in the Museum of Time, 1984. A Seth, Jane Roberts, and Robert Butts Combined Index. Unknown Reality, Volume 2, Education of Oversoul. Yeah, it's just, wow. I'm going to have to look up these books and see if I have any of the Seth books. I don't know. I actually can look right here in real time. Let me do just that. Bear with me a moment. I'll just do a quick search for Seth and see if I have any hard copy book or electronic copy books. God of Confusion, it says, is one that says it's Seth. I don't know. It's the only one that's come up so far. But that's the end of the chapter, by the way. It was a short chapter. I'm not going to get into a second chapter right now. The next one is called The Wing Makers and Time Travel. So that'll be interesting. Tactical magic. Yeah, I'm only seeing... Oh no, that's something about Egyptology. Somebody's going by the name Seth. That's okay, so Jane Roberts. Look up Jane Roberts. I'm curious. If I don't have them, I will get them. Because they sound interesting enough to want to maybe get into that a little bit. After all, that's what this stream is. That's why I call it the Occult Streams, because it's anything and everything I want to read, but it's meant to be stuff about UFOs, stuff about magic, stuff about, Seth. Why the hell not? Time travel. So, yeah. I will do some searching and see if I can come up with any of the Seth books in electronic format without costing myself some money, and see what I come up with. So that'll be it for this session, and I will I might game for a little bit. I'm not sure. If I do, it'll be starting at about 11. So I'll be back. See you in the next one, wherever that ends up being.
My heart is beating. I know the pieces. One is broken, one is beat. Because I have seen the fall. I have known about the body. I didn't have anything to say. Follow your heart. Don't say. If you leave it behind, someone will break. I left you my heart. Why did you do no answers. Don't know without you. How will I survive? You have no answers. Don't know without you. How will I survive?